Okay, let's look at the role of art. And, with art, we're looking paintings, drawings, sculptures, symbols, drama, the role of art. Now, the most important part of making something art is the part of the brain that it's coming from. Because the reason art is important in a healthy and vital culture is its balancing role within a context in which we in Western culture are heavily slanted towards the lineal, logical, materialistic left brain. And, you can add capitalistic, into that mix. It doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the group. But, we are a masculine culture in the West. So it's get to the point. Why not enjoy the circle and, take 3 or 4 hours to, arrive there at an idea? But no, get to the point and sound bites. And that doesn't make sense, so it's out. It's either this way or this way. And if this is true, then that can't be true. And so this is lineal thinking. And it's not ecological thinking. Ecological thinking is in many ways the antithesis of Western culture because everything is connected. Meaning, if you hear a sound, there is a way that that sound can be translated into something you can see. Now, you just may need an electronic gadget to light up when you play this sound, your tuning fork, where, you play an A and it shows an A, and you play a B and it shows a B, and going up and down, and you're transforming sound into light through, a mechanism. And I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with that particular piece, but the view of ecological thought, the ecological lens, assumes that everything is connected to everything else. That I must be part of this earth because for 3 minutes, I die. And if I don't, for a few days, I die. And if I don't, for a month or so, I die. So that's just 3, air, water, food. Those are just 3 ways that energy from this ecology out there. And then you start realizing, well, that food wouldn't grow if it wasn't for the sun. And I couldn't breathe if it wasn't for these trees. And I wouldn't have this cashmere sweater if it weren't for, cashmere goats in Yugoslavia, or where, I wouldn't have cotton if it wasn't over here, and the paint wouldn't exist if it hadn't been produced over there, and someone else produced my necklace and, the chain, and someone else produced this, and this stone is 40 million years old as a quartz, a rose quartz, 40 to 200 million years old. And that was mined over here. And the way it got to me was, driving all over here. And, it was shipped here and packaged here and resold here. And then this person did this. And you start realizing you can't exist for 5 minutes without a trace that goes out to millions of people's lives. And billions of years, we stand on the shoulders of giants as a speck of a speck of a speck of an integrated ecology, and lineal logic can't keep up with the decimal points, with the many fractal connections. And so we start going into poetry. Fractal connections, what's that? It's poetry. It's suggestive. It's metaphorical. And when we're, if we understand that lineal, careful thought is excellent at infusing massive doses of consciousness into very tiny bits of data, zooming in into very tiny bits of data, massive levels of consciousness. If we understand that this is the strength of what we might call, lineal scientific left brain thought, we also understand that it's hard to do that in the sweeps of time that can tell the narrative of a galaxy succinctly. But poetry can take our consciousness intuitively on those journeys. And you can't quite connect the dots because there's something happening in the space between words. And it's that area. It's that space between words. That thing that 99.9% of the universe is made of, at the basic level of the atom, where it's mostly space. And so if you can start working with space suggestively, space is the feminine principle, the point is the masculine principle. There's so much more space than there are particles. And this could possibly explain one of the reasons the masculine ego is so fragile compared to the feminine ego. The feminine ego is connected with all that space, with the womb, with the circle, with the group. The masculine ego is the individual, the point that stands out, that is the counterpoint. And it's much more fragile. It's in every man and every masculine ego has emerged out of the womb of the feminine, just like every human being has emerged out of the dance of this planet. This planet produced the DNA that we're made of. It produced our parents and grandparents before them. This planet is the song out of which we emerge, discovering through this refracted lens of 5 senses, this lens of consciousness, thoughts and feelings. What is our role? And within the cultural, continuum of lineal, nuanced scientific thought to figure out how gadgets are made and how to make the aspirin recipe perfect so it can be made 100 million times for all of the headaches that we produce in our culture. The counterpoint is art. But to get to that point of balance, if we understand that balance is a place of grace, that you can have a lot of weight on a pole as long as you keep it perfectly balanced. As soon as it heads off, you've got a 1-ton pole and it's off at 45 degrees, a person can't possibly hold it up from collapsing. It's too heavy. If you get it perfectly balanced, you have a grace and elegance. So we're looking towards that psychological grace by inviting balance, by inviting symmetry. We have a left brain and a right brain. Nature does not make mistakes for this long in evolution. Now, we've had 10,000 cultures. Cultures make tons of mistakes. Cultures are always biased and blind in one area or another. So our culture is obsessing with left brain lineal consciousness right now. Nature is not. If you look inside the matrix of the body, the psyche, the consciousness of an individual, you see that human beings are as interested in feelings as they are in thoughts, as they are in their body sensations. You go into the cultural education, dogma machine, and you find you will learn all about different abstract thoughts. You will learn nothing about emotions and very little about how to have a healthy body. So you see the culture is slanted, but nature has produced a baby that is as interested in feeling and art in connection as anything else. Which do you go with? Always pick nature over culture, because culture is further removed from the sustainable matrix of nature. Now, nature is sustainable because she's been around for more than 5 billion years. That's sustainable. And it's very sustainable if you realize that there's more complexity of consciousness, complexity of life and possibility today than there was 5 billion years ago when slime was just beginning to form. So you realize that nature's got a winner here. You see, that program is producing vitality and complexity. As Terence McKenna would say, novelty. And so nature's doing a good job at growing things. People, cultures, not so much. We kill off segments of thought, et cetera, et cetera. And so you want to follow nature rather than culture. Our culture is pushing us into the left lineal brain. Nature is giving us a full spectrum of consciousness, giving us equal awareness of heart, mind, and body. We're neglecting the right side. Now, art is anything that's coming out of that intuitive, emotional, visceral part of our consciousness. So one of the things that is going to be more valuable is if your body can move intuitively. I'm not thinking, my body is moving faster. That now I'm thinking. I just thought, is that a rhythm? Forward and back. But, my body is moving faster than I can think. And so I'm going to feel and get in touch with parts of my body doing this approach that I will not get in touch with if I'm saying I should walk this way because this is the appropriate way that business people walk in this cult of this culture. If I paint and put my fingers in colors and move around and notice how I feel and what comes up out of that, I'm going to be doing it from a part of my brain that is the counterpoint to the left lineal brain. And you want balance, you want symmetry as you move towards grace and a healthy sustainability and complexity on a human cultural level that learns from the sustainability of 5 billion years in nature. So it's engaging and creating that is coming out of that part of the psyche that, there's a joy. I don't know quite what it is, but this yellow, I want yellow, and I like this gold and this, and then maybe this little line here, and I have no idea what it means. That's the point. That's the kind of art that makes it a counterbalance. Saying, oh, is that a Kandinsky, and is this, and I think I need to scratch the lines more to make it more, fit in with this particular style of painting, and let me copy this little bit over from here. So there's a little painting there, like, oh, I got it wrong. This can be meditative and of a certain kind, but the more it can come out spontaneously, emotionally and viscerally, engaging the body, allowing spontaneity to lead, allowing emotions to lead, and letting the consciousness be a witness. What does this tell me about myself? If I'm suddenly enraged, and you get the lines, and maybe you dab your knuckles and paint, and it's done. It's like, what is that? What do I know about myself that could have that kind of energy? Have I dissociated? Is there some part of me that's buried down in there that needs to move, that has this pace that I have no idea about because all my consciousness is trained over here? The healthiest culture will allow this kind of art for this purpose, for self-awareness, for release, for integration, and also for influence. Because I guarantee that when you go back to your left lineal brain thought, etc., first of all, you'll realize it's not the be-all and end-all of the universe. Western left-leaning lineal thought is a very new invention in a very old universe in one species. And it's not clear that our species, relying solely on this part, would even survive. I mean, we've done more to kill the planet than any other species in human history. And we're doing it with the left lineal brain. Now, anytime you get into a self-referential loop that is destructive, it's bad news. Self-referential means it must be right because I'm right and I'm like this. And I'm like this because that's right, because I said it was right. And besides, everyone else is doing it because we've all agreed in this culture that, algebra is more important than emotional literacy, that, physics is more important than healthy human relationships. And so you can go off and get a Nobel laureate for physics while your family is falling apart with addiction and nobody even bats an eyebrow. It's like, well, that's how families work. It's like, no, that's not how families work. That's how corrupt, dysfunctional thought structures play out in Western cultures. Apply your science universally. So a good way to measure this is that if you spend a good third of your time, so what's a third of your time? 3 or 4 hours a day in intuitive, spontaneous, social, artistic, body-oriented, emotional interaction, which just happens to align with how a majority of tribal cultures spent their time. The women would have their circles and weavings. They'd also sing. They'd also engage with their bodies. They'd also move. They'd also empathize. They would feel certain things come out in that circle. Good 4 hours a day. The men would be out engaging in stuff like that, painting their faces and, scenting this and engaging with nature. And the animal would move this way. That's a relationship with nature. That's not a relationship with a machine that always does the same thing. So they were taken into these places of consciousness. And you just look at the metrics. How many of them were fat? How many of them were dying of cancer? How many of them had mental illnesses? How many of them were depressed? How many of them had to get a gym membership in order to be that fit? Not many. In other words, we've got something to learn.